What if your exhaustion, anxiety, and constant overwhelm aren't signs of weakness, but are signs of a nervous system stuck in survival mode? PTSD doesn't always look like flashbacks or dramatic breakdowns like you see in Hollywood. Sometimes it looks like chronic stress, guilt, people pleasing, isolation, and functioning on the outside while you're falling apart on the inside. Today, for PTSD Awareness Month, we're talking about the hidden face of trauma and why so many people don't realize they're living in survival mode. Do you want to achieve your goals, but anxiety is tripping you up? Like to keep those fun weekend plans, but depression has you canceling again? Hey, I'm Lori, dog mom, lover of nature, and hygge enthusiast. Positive psychology skills help me overcome chronic severe PTSD. If you're ready to learn how to overcome your anxiety and depression and rediscover happiness and purpose in life, then get your cozy on and let's get started. Welcome back to Practical Solutions for PTSD. As you can tell from the intro, we are going to be talking about the hidden face of PTSD today. And why do I do that? Largely because I know what it's like to be in a position where you can't figure out what's going on with you. You're dealing with this guilt because you're not acting the way you're supposed to, or the way you've always done in the past. You're overreacting, you're hiding from people, you're struggling with anxiety, you don't understand why, especially when everybody else seems to be perfectly fine with it, and you're having meltdowns over in the corner. I did that for years before I finally realized I was struggling with chronic severe PTSD. And why do I want to do that? Why do I want to talk about that and dive into that? It's not so that we can adopt this victim mentality. It's to give you the tools to be able to fix it. Because once you've identified what's wrong, then you have a plan for recovery. So this is to be able to help you to identify that, to take out some of the guilt of what you're struggling with, understanding this is a normal reaction, and to get you a plan of action moving forward. That's the goal. And this is part of what we do in the anxiety and depression breakthrough sessions, is to help you identify where you are and be able to get you a plan of action to get you better. So this isn't a meeting with a psychologist or psychiatrist. We're not going to talk about, hash through every single tiny thing that's happened in your past and work through from that perspective. This is a very practical, hands-on approach to dealing with helping you to survive the day to day, to identify, are you dealing with burnout? Are you struggling with depression? Are you dealing with seasonal depression? And just understanding what's going on so you can combat that. And then, are you dealing with PTSD? Is this the problem you're dealing with? And maybe you do need to hire a counselor. But I can help you with those practical tools that can help you survive the day, to get through today, and then to be able to find your way out of the dark back into the light and to have some hope. So that's what we do here. So practical solutions for PTSD.com/breakthrough. If you would like some help identifying what's going on with your nervous system right now and why you're struggling, and I can help you put the pieces together and get you a plan for moving forward. So again, that's practical solutions for PTSD.com/breakthrough. And you can schedule your first 60-minute appointment with me and we'll get you started down that pathway. So let's jump into this discussion about the hidden face of PTSD. Now, you might be in this place where you feel like the stress that you're experiencing is bigger than everybody else and you don't understand why. That maybe it's your fault, that you have weakness, that you're just stupid and don't know how to handle it. This is definitely a discussion for you. As someone who spent years functioning and looking really good on the outside, ticking all the boxes, smiling, showing up, while underneath I was struggling with all this severe PTSD, I know firsthand that trauma and PTSD doesn't always announce itself. I remember having this discussion with a friend of mine, and I had reached the end of where I could go, and I was having a complete meltdown. I was sobbing and just talking about how terrible things were at that point and how discouraged I was. And I remember at one point in that conversation, he looked at me and he says, "Lori, we all admire you." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You have a good job, you're single, but you own your own home, you do all this gardening, you have a nice car." He's like, "We all admire what you've accomplished and what you're doing in your life." And he had like a puzzled tone to his voice. He couldn't figure out why I was just falling apart. I was functioning. I had a good job. I was performing well. I was getting high ranks in my performances. I was meeting my deadlines. I was showing up, but inside I was coming apart at the seams. And I was doing all this landscaping in my yard because it was the only thing holding me together at that point. That was the one place I felt like I could channel some of that anxiety, the stress, and work through some of the depression and just kind of lose myself and forget about the day to day, forget about the fact that I was falling apart and just bury myself in my yard, figuratively speaking. So sometimes PTSD can hide behind the face of productivity. Man, you're just really knocking it out of the park at work. You're one of these overachievers, someone people depend on. Sometimes it hides behind perfectionism. I've talked to people who have had a traumatic experience. Let's say they had a car accident and now they're hyper controlled about any time they get into a vehicle. Everything has to be perfect. And sometimes PTSD can hide behind being the strong one, the one that people depend on, the one that always shows up, the one who's always there for other people. And because of that, you can spend years blaming yourself for symptoms that you're experiencing that are actually signs of a nervous system that is working overtime to try to keep you safe. And because you're working overtime to try to keep you safe, your cup is very full and you get one more drop and it's overflowing. And you start having these crazy things happen that you don't really understand. So, one of the biggest misconceptions about PTSD is that it only happens after combat, a violent assault, or catastrophic events. In fact, it was this very misconception that had me in the dark on my own PTSD for years. People would talk to me about various things, and I would talk about struggling with depression or anxiety. And then I would have this caveat: I don't have PTSD because I never saw combat. Yes, I worked for the Army. Yes, I was deployed for 2 years, but we never even had the threat of combat, much less actually seeing it. I was never violently assaulted. I never went through a catastrophic event. And so I don't have PTSD. It turns out I not only had it, but it was chronic and severe. Trauma isn't always defined by a single event, and there's a lot of different ones that can cause it. Trauma is an experience that impacts your nervous system. So, two people can go through the exact same experience and have very different responses to it because of how they reacted to it, how they processed the emotions after the event took place, what they did in the years following. There's a lot of things that go into why one person would have PTSD and the other doesn't. It can also come from a lot of different sources. So you have things like childhood emotional neglect, medical trauma. In fact, I've talked to people who had a heart attack and 2 weeks before they were perfectly healthy, and now all of a sudden they can hardly manage to walk the length of their house. And so it can really upset your life and has a huge impact on your emotional well-being. A caregiving for a sick loved one. There's a lot of emotions involved in that can cause trauma to someone's. That takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work. You have domestic violence, chronic workplace stress. Now, this is one that I dealt with personally, was that chronic stress in the workplace. Repeated losses, and this could be losses in relationships, it could be losses financially, but that constant where you're always losing the things that you care about that can cause trauma. Serious accidents. I referenced this earlier where someone was in a serious accident and then afterwards they became super controlling. And anytime they're in a vehicle, it triggers their anxiety levels and all this dealing with PTSD fallout from that accident. It can be military service. Absolutely. There is a big percentage of people with PTSD that have either military or first responder in their work history. It can be from a natural disaster. It could be growing up in an unpredictable home. The nervous system doesn't sit around debating whether your experience was bad enough. Was this a really, really bad one? Okay, now you can have PTSD. No, your system doesn't ask that. It simply asks if you're safe. Is the danger over? Can I let down my guard? And when the answer is repeatedly no, the brain begins to adapt. And the problem comes in with PTSD is when those adaptations continue long after the danger is past. You're no longer in that dangerous situation. You're no longer in that place where it's The way you survive is by fight, flight, fawn, or whatever the fourth one is. You're past that point, but you're still dealing with that dangerous feeling. This is where PTSD kicks in. So one reason PTSD often goes unnoticed is because many people become incredibly good at functioning. And that's where I was when I was talking earlier about, the friend saying, "Hey, we admire you. You have a beautiful home, a nice car, a garden, a great job. You've got your life together." And I'm like, "What? It's falling apart at the seams." But I was doing it. I was ticking all the boxes. I was showing up to work. I was taking care of my dogs. That was my family. And, I was meeting my deadlines. I was involved in some volunteer work. You could be showing up for everyone else except for yourself. You may not be showing up for yourself, but you're there for everybody else. You're still functioning, but nobody realizes how much energy it is taking out of you just to make it through the day. You may not even be realizing this. One analogy you can think about is, you're driving down the road and you've got the emergency brake partially engaged on your car. Obviously not intentional, but it's there. You're still getting where you're going. You're still getting to the store, you're getting home, you're going to work, you're coming home, you're running errands, whatever that may be, you're still getting the job done. But because that emergency brake is partially engaged, it's taking more wear and tear on the engine, more wear and tear on the car, the tires, and it's using more fuel because it's not operating at optimal levels. And this is how it can look like for you when you're surviving, highly functioning, or just making it through the day with PTSD. You're doing it. You're checking all the boxes. You're, getting high reviews at work. People depend on you. You show up. You do your thing. But it takes so much energy to do that. And it just wears the daylights out of you until there's nothing left. So you may look successful to others, while underneath that, you're feeling exhausted, disconnected, overwhelmed, and emotionally numb. People tell you how strong you are, or secretly you're wondering how much longer you can keep it up. Can I really do this one more day? How does PTSD show up in everyday life? More than just, like I said earlier, it's not just the dramatic meltdowns that you see in Hollywood. This is everyday life that you're living with. And it's not to say that dramatic meltdowns don't happen. I just told you about one of mine. They do happen, but it's something that you actually deal with on a day-to-day basis. So one of those is anxiety. Many people think they simply have anxiety. Like, oh, this is just something I'm dealing with. It's no big deal. But their system is constantly scanning for problems. Now, for me, I mentioned earlier that workplace stress was one of the things that caused my PTSD. So when I was at work, it was something I was constantly scanning for, always thinking about that. You could be overthinking a lot with your anxiety. It could cause a lot of overthinking. Planning for every possible outcome, like every possible outcome, all the time. Struggling to relax even when that's what you're supposed to be doing or what is on the agenda. Relax, but you have a hard time doing that. Like going on vacation and you're still keyed up. I'm feeling tense even during calm moments. Like you just can't quite unwind. These are not character flaws. It's a nervous system that has been trained to watch for danger. Another thing you could be dealing with is depression. So trauma can be so exhausting. And when your system has spent years in survival mode, it eventually runs out of gas. Just like that car that has the emergency brake or park brake partially engaged, you're still getting your stuff done, but you're going to run out of gas sooner than you should because it's taking more energy to get it done. Your system is going to eventually run out of gas, and you start struggling with depression. You may lose interest in things that you once loved. Like the things you love to engage in, your hobbies, your favorite hobbies, the favorite things you used to do, you just don't want to do it anymore. You feel emotionally flat because you have exhausted all your emotions. So when you're supposed to feel joy, you don't. When you're supposed to feel sorrow, supposed to put those in quotes. But when you're supposed to feel sorrow, you don't. When you're supposed to be dealing with all these, typical emotions, like this is what I should feel at this point, you're not. you struggle to find joy. And I remember this one was really hard for me because typically I was a very joyful person. I like to laugh and have fun and engage with people. And when I was going through some of the darker days, I couldn't find joy. There's nowhere to be found. I was just like, we're going to exist and die. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to survive another day until I can die and go to heaven. That's how I felt. And obviously, I found it again, and you can too. There is hope. You can find your joy again, I promise. But then you wonder why life feels colorless. And I've actually had people tell me that there's just no flavor in life anymore. It's just flat. I can't find anything. And when I would talk to them about doing something that brings them joy, like, I don't even know what that is anymore. Like, nothing has any flavor. Another day to day symptom that you'll see is irritability. And I struggled with this one as well. I remember sometimes I would be having a complete meltdown over something that was totally insignificant. In fact, there was another part of me, it was almost like an out of body experience. There'd be this part of me looking on going, what is your problem? Why are you doing this? And yet my body was just having this complete meltdown over something that did not hardly matter at all. Definitely not to the degree to which I was reacting. But your nervous system is overloaded. And when that happens, your patience becomes very scarce. So small inconveniences suddenly feel enormous. You snap at people you love, not because you're a bad person or because you don't love them, but because your system is already carrying more than it can comfortably hold. And it runs over. And I remember when I was at that point, particularly, and I would find myself at home just like completely having meltdowns over the most ridiculous things. And I was afraid that would happen in public. So, man, when I went out in public, I'd lock it down. And I would not talk about things because I was afraid of what would happen when I did. Another one of your daily symptoms that you're going to see is perfectionism. And this one can surprise people. Why would perfectionism be a symptom of PTSD? It's because you're trying to control everything, including the non-controllables, the things you have no control over. You're still trying to control it. You're trying to make everything perfect so that it's safe. If I do everything right, if I never make any mistakes, if I please all of these people, if everyone is happy, then nothing bad will happen. People will still love me. People will still accept me. I won't be hurt or betrayed or whatever. The accident will happen again. My health won't fall apart. Whatever your trauma is, if I can control everything and make it all perfect, then everything will be okay. The problem with perfectionism, and I say this as a recovering perfectionist, and it's a work in progress. But the problem is you never reach perfection ever. There's always something that you can improve on, and you cannot control everything. As hard as you try, you can't. And it is so exhausting trying to make everything perfect because you never reach it. So you're always striving. Another symptom that you'll see in everyday life is isolation. And sometimes this will result from other experiences you're having. It'll result in isolation. Like I was talking before when I was having complete meltdowns over the silliest things. I was afraid of how I would respond to people. And so I would lock it down. I wouldn't talk about things because I didn't know how I'd respond or if I'd have a meltdown. I didn't know what was going to happen. So I would just not engage, which leads to isolation. Struggling with depression, with anxiety, and I felt like I could not handle anymore. And so I would lock myself away from people because I just couldn't take it, which led to isolation. Trauma often convinces us that withdrawal equals safety. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, I talk to you often about understanding boundaries and when you can't handle anymore and to respect those limits. So I'm not asking you to violate that at all. But when you're dealing with PTSD, sometimes being with people can feel very threatening for a variety of reasons. They may or may not have played a role in your trauma, but it's just one more thing you have to handle. And you just can't. So you stop reaching out. You stop making plans with people, especially if when you make plans, you're constantly having to break them because you're not feeling good or, whatever happened. So when you keep breaking plans, you stop making plans. You stop engaging in hobbies, the things that you love, not because you don't care, but because you just don't have any energy left. It just feels like it's too much. You just can't do it. So this isolation, this pulling back results in loneliness, which then fuels the anxiety and depression even more, and it becomes this vicious downward spiral. So a lot of people don't recognize they have PTSD because your brain adapts. And I mentioned this earlier, like your brain adapts to the trauma, but then when you're not able to answer, I'm safe now, your brain continues that adaptation. And so you compensate. You build your life around those symptoms. And you think, this is just who I am now. I'm just this person that struggles with depression and anxiety. Like I said earlier, I was just going to exist and die. You're just like, oh, I've become the super introverted person. I'm just bad at handling stress. I'm weak. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. I'm broken. But that is not true. What if what you're experiencing isn't an evidence of weakness? What if it's evidence of a nervous system that has learned how to survive difficult circumstances? That is a very different story. One story creates shame, guilt, all this other those negative emotions. The other creates understanding. Like, oh, that's what's wrong with me. And understanding is often the beginning of healing. You cannot fix what you don't know is broken. This is I was talking about this at the beginning of the show. That's one of the things I do in the coaching sessions is to come alongside you and help you understand what the problem is so that you know how to fix it. And it may involve more people than me fixing it, and that's okay. But understanding is where healing begins. So this week, I want to give you a simple exercise, and it's going to be a little difficult if you tend to be critical of yourself. But I want you to suspend judgment for 7 days on all your emotions. Just suspend judgment. I want you just to notice what you're feeling. When you feel anxious, notice it. When you feel overwhelmed, notice it. When you avoid showing up for something, notice it. When the guilt shows up, which it will, almost guaranteed, notice it. So don't immediately label yourself, oh, you're broken, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're whatever. Not even going so far as to immediately label yourself as having PTSD or some other condition. I just want you to notice it. And definitely don't say, I shouldn't feel this way. Emotions are data. They're telling you something. So maybe instead just go like, that's interesting. My nervous system is reacting right now and I'm feeling anxious. So instead of saying, what's wrong with me? You might could ask, what might my nervous system be trying to protect me from? What information is driving this? Remember, emotions are data. You're not trying to fix anything this week. I want you just to become curious. Just curious. What's driving all of this? Because curiosity opens a door that criticism never can. Curiosity can open the door to healing. If today's episode resonates with you, I want you to hear this. Just because you learn to function doesn't mean you're not struggling. Just because others can't see your pain doesn't mean it isn't real. And just because you've carried it for a long time doesn't mean you have to carry it forever. PTSD doesn't always look like trauma. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion, anxiety, depression, isolation, or being the person everyone depends on while nobody realizes that you're drowning. You're not weak. You're not broken. You may simply be living with a nervous system that learned how to survive. But here's the good news. The same brain that learns survival can also learn safety. That question that your brain is always asking, am I safe yet? You can teach it that the answer is yes now, at least in certain situations, which can help start undoing some of that PTSD. So I want to thank you for joining me for this episode. And until next time, remember, healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens one practical step at a time. If you would like some help identifying where you are today and developing a practical plan for moving forward, go to practicalsolutionsforptsd.com/breakthrough and schedule your appointment today. Hey, my friend, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with someone you know who may be struggling with depression and anxiety? Also, would you please leave a quick review for the show? Knowing how this podcast is helping you fills my heart with so much joy, and it motivates me for future episodes. For now, it's time for Sam and I to head outside to enjoy some sunshine and fresh air. We'll see you back here on Tuesdays and Thursdays for more great episodes.